Hello and welcome to Founder FM, Voice of the Entrepreneur. I met my next guest last year in Berlin when I attended a Techstars demo event. He immediately caught my attention. He was a young guy working on two areas that really appealed to my marketing background, music and fans. Not only could Nik Schriefer speak great English, he liked getting up on the stage too. That's because he's been doing it all his life as a musician, touring, performing, producing, and managing. Entrepreneurs often wonder what business should they start or what idea should they develop. In this interview, Nik talks about the importance of building a business around a problem that you personally felt in your own life. In Nik's case, he found arranging tours and booking venues a real challenge, especially when you're doing it in another country and you're not a celebrity artist like Elton John or Rihanna. The best startups are the ones that fix problems, and they're often problems that founders would be working on even if they weren't in that startup. This is what we call pain points, the pain that people just like you feel in your daily lives. If you can solve a pain point, you have a customer. Not only a customer, but a fan, someone who go tell all their friends. That's the best marketing there is. In this interview, Nik shares his experience on developing Stagelink, how he built his first team of co-founders, and how they pivoted on the product, and also how they test everything that they do. At the time of Nik's first presentation, he was just graduating from the Techstars Accelerator and starting the process of raising a round. Even before raising capital, Stagelink was generating revenue, around 100,000 euros in ticket sales a month. 10 months on, he's just successfully closed that round and entering the scale phase of growth. This is his story.
Founder FM. You're listening to Founder FM with your host, Graham Brown.
Hello and welcome to Founder FM. My name's Graham Brown. Today I want to introduce you to a musician and an entrepreneur. We're going to talk about startup life in an accelerator, raising money, generating your first revenues, and everything in between. I want to introduce you to co-founder and CEO of Stagelink. Welcome to the show, Nik Schriefer.
Hi, Graham. Great to be on the show.
Hey, Nik, it's great to have you here, a man of such talent as well. I was looking at your bio, and you say here that you're composer, arranger, pianist, musical director, manager, producer, and also startup founder and CEO. There's quite a lot on your plate there. Seems that you're a man of many talents, especially musical talents. You're a musician from a young age?
Yes, that's right. I started to play the piano actually when I was 5 years old. And then trumpet was my second instrument. And then when I was a teenager, I got into jazz. So I found my own few groups and started touring and playing gigs while I was still in high school, basically.
Right. That's kind of important, isn't it? And that's an experience which shaped your startup as well, which we'll talk about in a minute. But you weren't just a jazz musician. You won a whole bunch of awards for your jazz, right? I mean, I can't list the number of awards that you won over a period of 5 years. You must have been a pretty outstanding musician.
Well, yeah, maybe you could say that. So, well, it wasn't just an interesting time for me. I mean, I was lucky to also play with a bunch of other very good musicians. So a lot of the awards were not just like for me personally, but were for the groups that I played with and toured with. And that was always the greatest thing for me to do, like to sit together with other like-minded people in a room to rehearse, to get up on stage, to play something great for the audience, to feel that connection, and then also to record and to like perfect your game. That was always like a very, very cool experience for me.
Fascinating. And you studied at the Manhattan School of Music. You did a master's there in music, jazz. And then when you were touring, you were a professional musician, effective. You were getting paid for touring. So where did you tour when you were playing your jazz?
Well, I toured all over Europe, basically, and then also a lot of Asia. I was on a tour in China for a couple of weeks, and Southeast Asia also, like Vietnam, Cambodia, Malaysia, Indonesia. I think that was the most interesting tour actually I ever did, like 3 weeks in Southeast Asia with an orchestra, with a jazz orchestra. We were the first orchestra to play in a bunch of those cities at all, like in Cambodia, and also China. I think we were the first jazz group to play in the Forbidden City Concert Hall in Beijing, which was pretty amazing in front of, I think, 2,500 people.
Wow.
That was all very, very cool experiences. Yeah, and yeah, I studied in New York, so I obviously also played around there. Although I never went on a big tour in the U.S. to be honest. And like you said, I got my master's from Manhattan School of Music, which is not entirely true. I actually dropped out after the first year to start the Stagelink, go all in in the startup world.
The classic story of the dropout. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that. What propelled you to start Stagelink? Because this comes back to your tour experience as a musician as well. You didn't just start something you thought, oh, this would be an interesting idea. You were experiencing some issue, right? What's the story there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. So, well, I was mainly on the stage for the first part. So I was playing, going on tour, and then I gradually moved more and more to the business side of things. So I was also managing a couple artists while I was like playing myself still, and then I was booking a few tours, and that was where like I had found the largest problems in the industry. That's always like booking was such a mess for everybody. No one wanted to do it really, and I tried to figure out why is that. And it's because it's really tough and it is tough because it is very risky. So like someone has to take the risk if you go on tour, right? Like you book venues, you route the tour, you book the hotels, travel, etc. And that costs money. And in the end, you don't really know, especially if you're an up and coming new band, if you actually will ever sell enough tickets. So you can actually pay the band for the tour. Or you might even make losses. And that was the biggest issue. Like all the promoters and venues were always asking, so like, what do you think? How many people will show up at the show? We don't really know that act. And that's when I thought, well, maybe we could do something about it. Maybe we can somehow try to evaluate demand or intent of people that want to go to particular shows. And that's how the idea for Stagelink was born.
So did you come at it from the angle of the musician or the musician's manager? Because I'm sure, these big ticketing companies exist already, right? They're out there and they're doing okay, as they see it from their perspective, right? Maybe they don't care so much about how the artist is doing, right? But, what angle did you approach this from? Where was the problem?
Well, the problem was mostly on the booking side of things, but then it affected the artist in the end as well. Because, I mean, you don't want to play in a 500 capacity venue and then only 100 people show up, which is like a disaster in terms of financials, but also for the artists, it's just they're not going to have a good time. And on the other hand, if you can play a 1,000-seat venue and you only book 500, then you also kind of make losses because you didn't use the opportunity there. So there are those ticketing giants, as you say. I mean, they are doing okay. They're also struggling from time to time. Like even a huge company like Live Nation and Ticketmaster, they have their problems, and also they focus on just a very, very top, not even 1%. It's probably less than 1% of artists out there. And all the others, it's not that important for them, and they might even have the bigger issues there.
Okay, so you're focused on this market where you've got artists who maybe are not big enough for a Ticketmaster or a Live Nation. They're not Elton John, they're not Coldplay, that kind of thing. So everybody else, and there's tens of thousands of artists out there. You decided that, you're going to do something for this market. You've identified a problem in the market. The first idea that you had, Nik, compared to where you are with Stagelink now, was it pretty much the same thing, or were there many pivots, so to speak, in that journey?
Yeah, so I would say we essentially did two pivots, actually. One was a product pivot and the other one was a market pivot. So the first one, when we started out, the first idea was to directly connect artists with venues, because booking a tour was always in touch with the venue manager or the buyer at a particular venue, and they were asking this question. So who's coming? What are they doing? They'll like the band, how many people they can get in. So I tried to kind of build a platform for those two parties. But then we found like it was still very hard to predict how many people would show up based on that just data and the communication that those people exchanged. So then we kind of did the first pivot when we brought fans on board on the platform. So how Stagelink works now is that the fans vote for a city and an artist that they want to perform there. And that's how we can predict how many people will actually show up at a show later on, which works pretty well. So the accuracy is actually greater than 90%. So that kind of solved this problem. That was our first pivot. So the funny thing is actually right now, 2 years after we started and like 1.5 years after this pivot, we are starting to bring the venues back in the platform. So it was kind of we figured out we needed something else first before we can make this happen, what we thought about in the first place. And the second pivot was, as I said, more of a market pivot. So in the beginning, because of my background also, we were focusing on a lot of, as you said, like up and coming emerging musicians, like independent bands that played, they came from New York City, wanted to play in Philadelphia. I wanted to figure out like how to do that. And then we had our first like bigger successes with larger tours with artists that actually came from TV, like from casting shows, like an American Idol or a Got Talent series. So then we ask ourselves, well, why is that? Why is that such a particularly good group? And we figured that they got attention in a medium which was not touring, but like large attention. They had engaged fan bases that they didn't really yet leverage for putting together a tour or live events at all. So that's when we decided we want to focus on those types of artists, which is people coming from TV, and then what's the next TV is YouTube or like online video. So that is basically our main target group right now.
Right. So you've gone from these sort of garage type bands to moving across to YouTube stars and celebrities, right?
That's right, yeah, and not necessarily only musicians.
Right, okay. So what kind of people, I mean, my sort of experience is when I look at my son, who's like 10 years old, and he watches like, PewDiePie, or these kind of people with the gaming channels who have got, just crazy following, but they watch this stuff religiously, right? I don't know how they find out about it, but they all seem to find out about it at that age. Those kind of stars seem to be like the emerging talent coming from YouTube. Is it people like that, or do we go beyond that?
It's exactly people like that. So it's obviously a lot of musicians that also use YouTube these days to promote themselves, which makes a lot of sense for them. But there's different groups, and you mentioned one. It's gaming. So gaming will be a very important group of vertical for us as well. We haven't gotten into gaming that much yet. So for us, music was the first vertical. Then we expanded to comedy. And then the third one was beauty, actually. So we have routed a couple beauty tours where YouTube makeup channels, for example, they rent out pop-up stores and they meet their fans. Like they show them how to do makeup, they do challenges, and it's just a fun party for everybody. And it was very successful, actually, when we started this earlier this year here in Germany. And gaming will be the next important channel. I mean, there are already pretty big tournaments. There's esports, right? There's the Electronic Sports League that hosts huge events around gaming. I think what we will do is a little more in the community space, because that fits better the YouTube spirit. Will not be like sports tournaments in a 20,000 seat arena, probably more like a little closer, intimate atmosphere.
Okay, so going back to your example with beauty, I'm imagining these sort of makeup artists, and these are the kind of people that you see doing all the how-to videos, right? And they get a lot of followers. They do like tips and tricks, how to look like, Amy Winehouse or that kind of look, right? So, with these beauty tip producers, would they have events anyway, or would this be their first opportunity through Stagelink to, actually contact and, be with their fans in the physical world?
Yeah, so for the vast majority of them, it's the first time they do that, actually. And it's also the only option really they have right now, because, I mean, the essential problem those people have, they have those huge followings on YouTube, let's say, but they don't really know who the people are in the real world. They also don't know where exactly they are located, and they don't know how to reach them. They cannot access them, not in a specific targeted way. They can just put something out for everybody, but they can't say, well, I will be in Germany next month. So like, where are you guys there? Like, how many people are in Hamburg and how many in Berlin, and so on and so forth. So that's something they cannot do without a tool like Stagelink.
For these stars who've built up their presence on YouTube, what would be, beyond the revenue side, what would be the benefit of doing these kind of events? I mean, obviously you've been a musician and you've had live concerts, you know what it's all about. But for these guys, they spent most of their life sitting behind the other side of the screen, right? And for them, it's comfortable. Right. They don't have to go out. They don't have to prepare. They don't have to tour anywhere. Why should they be bothered with all of that?
Well, I mean, money is definitely could be one reason. What you mentioned. So, for example, we've routed a tour recently with a guy that came from the TV show The Voice, and he had a pretty big YouTube channel and made about, I think, $20,000 in ad revenues in a year. And it's a kid, it's like 15-year-old guy, so for him it's like really, really good pocket money.
Wow!
Then he used Stagelink to route his first tour, and I believe in actually less than a month he sold more than $100,000 in tickets for a tour. That's kind of what the dimensions are like. So it's not only that they can open up a completely new channel, like connect with their fans in a different way, like in a real live setting, but then also there's a very big revenue opportunity for those people.
Right. That's fascinating. I mean, for someone like him, I imagine once The Voice has been forgotten about, he would have been forgotten about, right? For him, it's a fantastic opportunity, right? That he had the right timing to get out there. He had the YouTube following as well, and for the venues as well. It's a low risk option, isn't it? Because these people already have fans who want them to come to these places. So tell us a little bit about how that actually works when you talk about fans trying to get artists to come to a place. Let's say, for example, here in Tokyo, we want to get Nik Schriefer to come and play jazz here, right? How does that work? How do we sort of set that up, and what's the mechanism behind all of that?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So we start with the artist at the moment. So I would have to go on Stagelink, create my profile, and then reach out to the channels that I already use, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, whatever, to my fans on these particular platforms that they should go out and vote for me to come to Japan or wherever they want me to come to.
Right.
So then they would use a link that I push out as an artist through my socials to Stagelink, and I would go there, and they find a very, very simple form actually, where they put in the city that they want me to come to and the price that they would be willing to pay for a ticket. Because if I've never done that, I've never been to Tokyo actually, so I don't even know what people would be willing to pay, and I need to kind of be able to calculate in the end, is it worth it for me going there? Can I cover the expenses? So that's what all the fans would do. Usually these kind of campaigns take 3, 4, maybe 5 weeks. And then because Stagelink in the background also promotes and pushes the messages of the artists through their social channels, we actually put down a little money. So we enhance the ad spending on Facebook, Google AdWords, and so on. And then after those couple of weeks, the artist or I would have a very good picture of what my fan distribution of the whole world looks like in terms of who's interested in a live event. And then I would see, well, maybe there's 350 people in Tokyo. They would be willing to spend $30 or the local currency then probably. And then I could make up my mind if it makes sense. Or I could contact if I'm independent, I would contact a promoter probably in Tokyo and tell them, hey, look, I have real demand there. Do you want to set up a show for me? Or if I'm a larger artist already, I might have an agent that books my tours, so they would go ahead and use that information.
And that must then bring into play an interesting fan-to-fan element, right? Because I can imagine if I could say, right, hey, look, if we can get all these people to vote for Nik in Tokyo, then we can get him to come here, right? But me on my own, I can't do it. But, I can then share that email with 1,000 people who then share it with their friends, and you get that real fan-to-fan marketing.
Yeah, we even have fans that produce their own videos to promote this campaign. They put out, we had that we had a campaign running for Tiffany Allward, a pretty large music YouTuber from the States, and we had fans doing videos for their particular cities. Come to Toronto, and Amsterdam was pretty high up for her. That was very cool to see. The fans were getting really active about this, and it was kind of a trending topic.
And I see as well, for a younger generation of music consumers, YouTube is the starting point for discovering music, right? So, there's a close association between these artists now on YouTube and their fan bases, especially young fan bases, right? Whilst we do still have shows like The Voice and the Idol type shows that are still out there, but generally speaking, there's that and then a big gap, and then all these artists sort of, building their fan bases on YouTube.
Yeah, that's lots of discovery happening on YouTube. In fact, I mean, everybody talks about Spotify and like those guys, but YouTube is the largest music streaming service.
All right, cool. Well, let's talk about the growth of Stagelink itself. I mean, it's a fantastic service that you offered, and I think it's got a real future potential. But that doesn't make it easy necessarily to go out and raise money, right? Because this is the hard part, right? So you spent a lot of your time. I know when we spoke first, just after I think you were still in the Techstars program back in summer last year in Berlin, where I saw your presentation. And, you just graduated from there. You were out looking for funding, and you've literally just closed your first round, or you're going through the technicals of the first round and getting that signed off. So that's a period of, wow, nearly 10 months that you've been involved in that process. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what you've learned in the process?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So, I mean, you said fundraising is the hard part. I'm not sure if I would necessarily say that. I think what became very clear for me is like fundraising is way easier when you have like good business to show. And we had good business. It was growing, but it was not like crazy. But actually for a few months now, since the beginning of this year, our business grew much quicker. We got a couple of very, very good deals on board, and somehow we got more traction, also media coverage and PR. And that then, on the other hand, again, fueled the investment talks. And there were actually people approaching us and like asking me actively, hey guys, like, are you raising a round? Like, are you looking for money? And then everything came together fairly quickly in the last like 2 or 3 months, while before it was pretty tough for us. And we actually like we almost had a round done before Christmas, and then it fell apart because of one like very unlucky circumstance. But then like with the business going better and better and growing, this everything became just so much easier. So I would say also like if you want to raise money, you have to do fundraising obviously, but it's not the only thing you should focus on. Like it might even be more important to focus on growing the business, and then the money comes.
How do you stay focused on that? Because I'm sure these are like two things that you have to do as the CEO and co-founder of a business, that, you've got to go and raise money, you've got to go and speak to the investors, but on the same time, you've got to grow a business, right? How do you sort of balance these two things together?
Well, there's day and night, so you just have to do it. I'm not sure if it wasn't such a big stretch for me. It didn't feel, it's exhausting sometimes, obviously. It's just a lot of work to do, but it's just so motivating for me to do what I love and to be able to work on this project of mine. So it wasn't really a difficult task to do. It's just like, you have to go out and do it. Like, do great things and talk about it, and then people want to be part of your story.
Yeah, sure. And you like getting up on stage and performing as well. So it's all part of the act for you, right? I think that's a cool part of it. You're not afraid to get out and tell the story, present. By that stage, when you'd graduated Techstars, you'd already started generating revenues, and now you're generating, 100,000 euros a month in gross value, in gross revenues, right? And I think that makes it easy for an investor to look at your business and see it as a lower risk business. So you've got all these investors coming to you. How do you then choose between them? Is it just a case of picking the guy with the biggest wallet, or is it a little bit more intelligent than that?
It's definitely a little bit more intelligent than that. Especially, I would still consider us a very early stage company. So for us, it's very important who to get on board. I think that's the most essential part. Is like, what is your team? And it can be like it's the very narrow team, the people like working on a day-to-day basis together with you in a room and like getting the business off the ground. And then there's a little more wider team where the investors are part of and like advisors that can just help you connect the dots, like that can use their experience, their expertise and their network to help you grow, to find the right partners, to internationalize, which is like our big next challenge. And so it's very important also with investors to have people that can actually help you with that. Otherwise, I wouldn't take the money, especially not at this stage.
Right. So when you were looking at investment partners, you were very focused on what kind of doors they could open for you, especially, internationally. How could they give you access to partners in different markets, right? That was a key part of your criteria for choosing investment.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. So you secured the investment, and what happens next? Now that you've locked down the investment, you've got a bit more burn time now. What happens in your growth path?
Mm-hmm. So, in my opinion, we are at a stage where we proved the concept, it works, and now we have to get in the scaling mode. Like you can say, there's a couple stages in startup life, right? Like you have the very first, you have an hypothesis, an idea, you have to somehow validate it. I think we are beyond that step now. And now the next step is to scale it, to grow it, like to use what you already proved that works and just multiply it. Multiply can mean different verticals, can mean different geographical regions. And that is something to figure out now. And also multiplying means multiplying the team. So a big part and an essential part in the next few weeks will be hiring. And then hiring the right people, hiring for the right positions, and then trying to, as I said, multiply what we've already achieved.
Okay, so this is where the scale stage of your business growth really starts, isn't it? And it's all about speed and access to resources and partnerships. What do you think you've learned in all of this as an entrepreneur? Because you came into the business originally seeing a problem that you experienced as a musician on a day-to-day basis. And now you've gone through the Techstars Accelerator, you've raised funds, or spent 10 months raising funds successfully. You've grown a business which is already producing revenues. You've gone through quite a journey as an entrepreneur. So I'm curious to know, looking back when you started out, is it everything you thought it was going to be, or have things sort of gone differently?
Well, things have gone differently, definitely. So, I always expect almost that things don't go as expected, if that makes any sense. So it's somehow like a probabilities game. You can influence the outcome, your team influences the outcome, and then also things like that just happen externally that influence the outcome. So what I always like is testing. So I wouldn't go out necessarily and say, well, I expect we do this and then this has to happen. But I love testing different options and then checking out the statistics and then figuring out what's the best way to go. And that's that is true for the product. If we do new features, we test everything basically. Luckily, my CTO, he has the same mindset, and it's also very much about those things. So you can test stuff from what the color of a button would be. That's kind of these examples that you see in the book sometimes, which might not make that much sense. But you can also our recent test was testing sign-up methods, for example, what works better. And so I'm careful with expectations sometimes, although you have to build a model for the business, where it can go. Even there, you could have different scenarios, different paths to go. And I like to think in that way. There's multiple paths that can all have good outcomes. Maybe some are more favorable, more preferred to you. But that's a little bit how I view the development of the company.
So are you always testing, or you must feel sometimes, Nik, that you say, right, now just do this, right? Because I've got this feeling about this thing or this product feature. We're just going to do this. We're not going to test it because we just want to get it out. Do you ever get that, or do you have to test everything that you do?
Well, it's true for the bigger things. You cannot test everything. You cannot. Sometimes there might be two strategies, and you cannot do both. And you just have to go for one. And there's actually one important decision still to be made, and we're discussing this pretty heavily right now. Is that the SaaS or some kind of tool strategy versus the platform strategy, which I think we would fit into both categories. But I think thinking about scale and where this can go and what the opportunity is at hand, the platform opportunity might be the bigger one, but might also be the much riskier one. So that might be a decision that just has to be made and cannot be tested.
Okay, fine. And the three of you, the three co-founders that you have for Stagelink, were you friends? Were you known to each other before you entered Techstars, or did that sort of happen when you entered that accelerator program?
I knew Michael before we started Stagelink. Mike, I got to know. Actually, that was also funny. I think we first met in some Facebook groups and then meetups, and then at some point we started working together on a freelance basis, and then it went that well that we just decided, well, we just have to go all in on it. But that was already before Techstars. So we had the team, like the three of us, we already had started on working on Stagelink before we actually entered Techstars.
If you were to sit down with a younger Nik and mentor yourself, starting out, whether Nik's just going on tour at the moment, he's got he's playing jazz piano, he's got a tour of Southeast Asia, he's going to go through that, and then, he wants to go and start a startup. Would there be any advice that you could offer at this stage? Maybe mistakes that you could, maybe help smooth through, get up that learning curve a little bit faster? What would you say to yourself?
Well, I think the single biggest thing to say would probably be just do it. I think I might have sometimes hesitated a little too long for things and then weighed all the options and just the spirit about just doing stuff. I kind of developed that, I believe, in the last couple of years more. Not so much hesitation. Something bothers you, just change it. It's I feel there's always something you can do about something that you feel uneasy about. Even if it sometimes might not be your fault or not even caused by you in any way, but you just have to. You don't like something, you have to do something about it, and just addressing problems very instantly and in a smooth manner. That's kind of I think one of the key parts that go with everything I do, and I kind of learned over the past couple of years.
You've obviously had exposure to a lot of ideas outside of Germany as well, and I look at markets like Germany to be full of innovation. And like here in Japan as well, young entrepreneurs coming through, they have ideas, they're surrounded by talented people, especially in the technology side. And some of the things you talk about, Nik, about just do it, take action, you can change something. I wonder if, people here in Japan, or maybe the same in Germany, have that in them at an early stage, because, maybe the cultural bias is to not just do it, but think about it first, or, see what everybody else is doing. Or, do you find that, when your sort of entrepreneurial circles in Germany, it may be a little bit different to somewhere like Silicon Valley, where everybody seems to be taking action on things and, not too worried about making mistakes?
Yeah, I think you might be right about that. I think there are cultural differences, definitely. But it's also changing, I feel. I mean, I am biased now, obviously, because I live in Berlin, and I also think that Berlin is not like the rest of Germany. Where I come from is a small town in the west of Germany called Münster. They're definitely, I think there's a lot of academics, and my parents are both teachers, and there's a lot about not risking too much, being on the safe side of things. So that's kind of where I come from. Funnily, I was always a little different. Already starting out as a musician and studying music is not really a safe thing to do in terms of figuring out your future. So I think you're right. It might be a culture difference from, let's say, Germany to the US, or Japan probably being a little more similar even to Germany. It's funny, there are some things you can actually prove is, I'm thinking about the music market all the time, but there's one striking thing is the CD share, CDs that are still being sold. I think Germany and Japan are both the two single largest companies still selling CDs, right, in terms, compared to streaming or digital downloads, which I'm not sure if this has to do something with the same thing, but it's probably also a cultural difference there.
I guess as well, it's a lot to do with the way that the music industry, entertainment industry is organized. It's still very top down. So they still got a control over that industry, right? And, like you're coming in and disrupting things from the bottom up, right? And, whether your space is in ticketing or, in entertainment, you probably look at Germany and Japan, it's probably dominated by a small handful of entertainment companies who control everything, all the way from, artist management to distribution. So that's probably why you still have CDs here. Given the choice, I'm sure people would love to have streaming, right? But as we've seen in other markets, it's not easy.
Yeah, the control issue that you're mentioning is actually not very much different in the United States. There's also just a few companies controlling the largest stake of the industry.
What would you advise for a young startup founder? Let's say, they could be in Germany like yourself. They've got an idea. Maybe, they could have been a musician and they could have seen something and want to change something. And they just starting out. Maybe they're on their own at this stage. They just have an idea. Maybe they've tested a few things. What would be the next steps for that person? Do they need to think about getting into an accelerator? Do they need to think about moving country? Do they need to think about co-founders, investment? Where should they start? There's so many things floating out there. Where would you focus them?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think they should start with themselves. Like thinking about, is that something that really bothers me? If yes, can I do something about it? If again, yes, do something about it. Would be the first step. And then obviously maybe they figure out, well, I cannot do this on my own. It's just there are some skills that I don't have. There's some people that I don't know. So the next step for me would be, if I figured out, well, yes, it's something that I want to do, I want to change, talk to people, get opinions. And this is another topic that has been touched on a lot, but don't be afraid that someone steals your idea or anything like that. I think that never really happens. If someone else does it, then we're just not fast enough probably, or we're not convinced or committed enough. So talk to people, get feedback, and while doing that, you will probably also find people that want to join you on your quest to something and changing something. And I would not, when I was just thinking about a new thing to start, I wouldn't think too much about investment or accelerate all this. First of all, it's important you have a clear vision of where this can go, a kind of a mission, how you get there, what you want to do about it, and then probably people. That's not true for everybody and every idea, but probably people you can do this together with. And this also, I think, depends on your personality. For me, it's just so much more fun, so much more motivating to work on something together with others, compared to just sitting in a room by myself and figuring it out. So yeah, that would be the first things I would say might make sense to think about. And then you were talking about location, which I believe impacts all of those. It impacts the way you think, it impacts the people you can meet. So location is definitely a pretty big factor in this whole thing.
Right. Okay. So what you're saying is start with yourself. Do you care enough about this problem that you're willing to invest a lot of time and heartache in trying to fix it, right? It's going to be a long, hard slog trying to make this work. So you've got to ask yourself, is this something that I really care deeply about? Would I want to fix it even if I wasn't in a startup, right? Would I try to be doing something about it if I wasn't getting paid for it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's not I think you cannot go out and say, yeah, I want to do a startup.
Right.
That's not how you do it. It's you want to fix something. You want to solve some particular problem, but you don't want to do a startup per se. I think there are people that just want to do a startup, but I think they shouldn't found it. They can join a startup. That can be valuable as well.
So that's a really important point. Start with the problem that you're trying to solve, right? Rather than, the vehicle for the solution, which is the startup, right? And then you said about talking to people. I think this is something that people forget, the value of your own network, right? Within that network, often there are people who feel the same pain, right? People who, musicians like you who would have felt the same thing. So start talking to those people, get out there, do the events, do the hustle, right? Go to these events, talk to people. That's where you're going to find people who are going to be attracted to your idea and, what you're talking about. Somebody says, yeah, I feel that too, right? You might find a co-founder, or you might find, like you did, through Facebook groups, right? You've got to get out there and start talking about this stuff and then start developing a vision, which is, I guess, the long-term game, right? Where does this go? What could this be? Is there anything that you feel that somebody's giving you advice along the way that you want to share? Maybe some of your mentors or stuff that you've learned in, growing the business that you think is like an aha moment, stuff which you think other founders could really benefit from?
I've really benefited from a network in various ways. I think like most of the progress that Stagelink was able to do was somehow based on some initial introduction that I got. So I think if you surround yourself with the right people that are willing to help and just do introductions to potential partners, to investors, to potential team members, and so on and so forth, that helps a lot. And I'm not sure if I'm able to pinpoint one particular advice, but I just feel that I'm very lucky to have a lot of people that are willing. Just willing to help, willing to make introductions. And actually the Techstars network was pretty helpful with that as well. Just to mention that, I mean, it's a great global network, and I get a lot of good introductions through that network, and everybody is so helpful. Not only the Techstars folks here in Berlin, also did from other cities. For example, Los Angeles is a very important city for us in the entertainment world, and the managing director there made a lot of good introductions for me, and also gave great advice.
Well, that's great advice in itself, isn't it? The power of importance of your network.
Yes.
And why you should grow it and nurture it and look after it, because that's really the value that you'll have now, but also long term. So surround yourself with the right people. And if you can't find those people, then, go out and start a meeting, right? Start a meetup and attract those people to you, right? Well, why not?
You can do that. Yeah. And then also it's actually, I steal that from Techstars again, is their mantra is very simple. It's give first. And that helps as well. Like if you are helpful to other people and you give first and you try to add value and help someone else progress, then this will come back to you.
That's Nik Schriefer, everybody, co-founder at Stagelink, musician and inspiration. I wish him all the best with Stagelink, and it'll be interesting to see how that journey transpires, and we'll see 6 months, 12 months down the line what's going on at Stagelink, because I'm sure you guys are onto greater things, not just expanding into different markets geographically, but also different vertical sectors. That's a really exciting area that you're in. So we've got to watch this space. Hey, Nik, thanks for coming on the show and sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much, Graham. It was a pleasure.
Founder FM, voice of the entrepreneur. Find out more at www.founderfm.com.